Right, I couldn't help myself. This is the great debate. Are we ready for Rishi on Sky News? Thought we'd have a buzz, have a listen to it. Obviously, on this kind of thing, they do. Oh, hello, Lady Sif. Hello, my lady. What are you doing? Hello, my lady Sif. Okay, just crash my video. Yeah, it's one of those where it's one of those panels for the audience watching. See their reactions. I will let you know what I see. However, if you don't believe me, I will leave a link either up here or at the end of the video to this specific video so you can see it yourself.
Welcome to the show that puts you at the centre of the national conversation, talking about the issues that matter to you the most. Tonight, get ready for Rishi. Mr. Sunak will be Britain's next Prime Minister. After an incredible turn of events, he secured the votes of more than half of all Conservative MPs. But the party remains divided. What's next for Britain? Bruised and battered by these past exhausting weeks. I'm Trevor Phillips, and this is The Great Debate. Each week, we get to the heart of the issue dominating the headlines. Britain's new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has pledged to bring his party and the country together in the face of profound economic challenge. Well, the Conservatives may want to dismiss the last few weeks as a fever dream, but it's now time to get down to reality and the difficult business of government. As usual, our viewers panel from across the country and indeed across the world will share their experiences, they'll have their say. And here in the studio, Health Minister and Rishi Sunak supporter, the Conservative MP Robert Jenrick. The Shadow Leader of the Commons, Fangam Debonair. Senior Research Fellow of UK in a Changing Europe, and former civil servant Jill Rutter.
I've heard of Jill Rutter's name, I don't know why.
And the Times columnist and publisher of Reaction, Ian Martin. The big question tonight, Britain's next Prime Minister. Are you ready for Rishi?
No, I'm fucking not.
Rishi Sunak is therefore elected as leader of the Conservative Party.
Let's begin, as we always do, with our viewers panel and talk to Christine Robertson in Market Drayton. Good evening, Christine. What's your
Good evening, Trevor.
What's your feeling this evening?
I feel like we're witnessing political deception by the Tories and the 1922 committee to stay in power and avoid a general election.
Right,
the Tory party is split. The rest of the country did not have a chance to vote. Rishi Sunak has no mandate, and we need honesty and integrity urgently. Not more chaos
There's a mandate
and
if he goes by the
psychodrama.
manifesto. But still, that was Boris
Christine,
Johnson's
thank you so much
mandate.
for that an unambiguous point of view. Let's go and see if we can find another point of view. Let's talk to Janet Cohen, who's in Crouch End in North London. Janet.
Good evening, Trevor. I am pleased that Rishi is the new Prime Minister. He has the mandate in terms of the Conservative MPs. He has the economic know-how. I am happy with a Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt coalition. Penny Mordaunt was just too similar to Liz Truss, and she even endorsed Liz Truss's economic strategy. This is going to be good, especially if he takes a diametrically opposed course to his predecessor, Kwasi Kwarteng, and put the weakest, poorest, and those who are struggling at the grassroots with the cost of living at the forefront of his policies by avoiding austerity and embracing
Twice as rich as the king.
and enhance public expenditure, especially for schools, hospitals, and public service generally.
All right. Thank you very much, Janet. a very different point of view.
Damn it, Janet.
Let's go to Paul Johnston. Paul, I think you've got a question for our panel.
I have, Trevor. Good evening. Yes, so I believe that the Conservatives have become a bit of a shambles. We can't keep going on like this. Too many changes, and we need some stability. And to be honest, that really means Labour now. If it was a business, it's been so bad, you'd probably shut the business down,
Right.
talking as a business person. So my question is, isn't it time for a general election?
What are you doing?
Thank you very much, Paul. I would normally come in to talk to our panel, but before I do that, I want to see what our viewers panel thinks, what the feeling is in the country, as it were. Paul has asked, is it time for a general election? Now, we talked about this last week, didn't we? And there was a point of view, which I'll replay in a second, but let's see what you think tonight. Those who are in favour of a general election now or very soon, please raise your hands. And we're going to pan along and see what we're getting from. We are seeing
60%.
a lot of hands there. I think
60%
last
say
week
yes.
it was something like 60-40. It looks to me like there are more people who want
Really?
a general election now. All right,
65.
let's
Probably
put this
more
to
than
our
that.
panel. Paul's question is,
Again,
isn't
check it out
it
yourself.
time for a general election? Langham Debonair, why don't you surprise me with your view on this?
Labour. I wonder.
Of course, it's a time for a general election. It's absolutely time for election because we've had months, as I think Christine and Janet both said in their different ways, of a psychodrama, of chaos, but also, most importantly, people who've been struggling to see how they're going to get through the winter, how they're going to manage to both heat their homes and feed their families, if they're going to be able to manage to pay their rent, their mortgage. Now, with all of that, and what's the Tory party, the governing party, been doing? They've been fighting amongst themselves. They've been squabbling over who's going to be whose turn it is this week to be Prime Minister. It's just not good enough. We need stability, and in order to have stability, we need a Labour government. The only way we can do that is to have a general election.
Okay, Robert Jenrick, I don't expect you to say
Yeah.
we need a Labour
No.
government, but what about the general election?
I don't think that's the right answer.
Oh, of course you
the
don't.
Conservative
Because
Party was
the
elected in
Tories get
2019.
murdered.
Our mandate comes from that general election and the manifesto on which we were all elected. And what Rishi Sunak said today very clearly is that he intends to govern according to that manifesto.
We'll
And the
see about that.
principles
If
on
it's
it
Tory-
were
if
that we
it's
would spread
austerity
opportunity
2.0,
to all
then
parts of the country, that we would
should
work
will
to
be.
preserve and protect the NHS and public services, that we would bear down on immigration, be strong on defence. And I don't for 1 minute argue that it hasn't been a regrettable period. I think it has been. As a Conservative, I'm embarrassed
that's a
about
fucking
some of the events of
understatement.
the last few weeks. There's a big task for us now to rebuild trust and confidence amongst the general public. I do think, knowing Rishi Sunak extremely well, that we now have somebody, or will tomorrow, at the helm who is a very serious person, a mature, professional leader for this country who will address the questions that Christine and others have already said.
All right. I'm going to come back to you, but let's just check with Paul. Paul, you've heard what Robert Jenrick has to say. Are you persuaded that this is not the right time, that we should have other priorities right now?
It's definitely the right time. You probably won't believe this, but I actually did vote for the Conservatives. But I just think it's just been such a disaster. You just can't believe a word they say.
I'm sorry to pause it here. That is something I have heard from actual Tory voters over and over again.
And I just wouldn't vote for them.
Paul,
Those words.
Thank you very much. Jill Rutter, we probably haven't been in exactly this position before, but what is the formal position? We don't need a general election because we've got a new Prime Minister, but what's happened in the past?
No, because we've got a parliamentary system, the Conservative Party still has a majority of around 70, so we will only get a general election if either Rishi Sunak, for some reason, decides as Prime Minister that he needs to go and renew his mandate. Remember, we had those debates when Gordon Brown took it over from Tony Blair, whether he should go for an election or not. And actually, in some ways, the fact that he didn't go for an election then was seen as a bit of a sort of loss of face, actually, because he's marched everybody up the hill and then decided not to call an election. Theresa May took over in similar circumstances after David Cameron resigned. She originally said she was going to rule out an election, then decided to go for it in 2017 to improve, she thought, her position in Parliament. Obviously, that didn't work. So there's no necessary thing. So we only get a general election either if Rishi Sunak decides to call one, or if Thangham's party can persuade sufficient Conservatives that they're so disaffected and share Paul's view that they vote with Labour in a no confidence motion and the government falls.
Ian Martin, what do you think? Should Rishi Sunak just say, I want my own mandate?
I think, as you can see from the strength of feeling tonight, the Tories are going to be really lucky to get away with this idea that they don't have an election, such as the shambles and the disaster of the last, it's not just the last few days that have been very stressful, but just what they've inflicted on the country for the last year. I do, on the other hand, though, think that it's a bad idea immediately now, because I think the international situation is so precarious and the economic situation is so precarious that I don't think a 6-week general election campaign is a particularly good idea. And I think the country I think Rishi Sunak is going to have to level with people about how difficult the winter is going to be on the economic front, in terms of the war and the energy crisis. But I think by the time you get to the spring, through the other side of it, I think they will have to hold an election.
That's an interesting point, though, Robert Jenrick. Maybe not now, but don't have to wait till December 2024, do you?
The Prime Minister could choose to go sooner than that, but I think I was going to concur with Ian that when Rishi Sunak makes his remarks outside Downing Street tomorrow, I think he needs to be very frank and honest with the public about the scale of the challenge that he faces as Prime Minister, we face as citizens.
Largely of which was inflicted on us by your party, you prick, and partly whilst you were in government, you dickhead. Sorry, 2 secs. Yeah. It's his party, so like that's likely led it into this mess, so...
Citizens of the country, the economic context, the challenge to the public finances, the stress that public services are under as they're still in the long shadow of COVID. And I think that's the message that he will deliver, one of honesty, straightforwardness, and seriousness of purpose in trying to tackle them and restore public trust in the government by being seen in time to be a highly competent and professional government.
All right. Stephen Gilligan, I think, Stephen in Dumbarton. Robert Jenrick's just pointed out that the Prime Minister-to-be will appear on the steps of Downing Street tomorrow. What do you want to hear from him?
Well, to be honest with you, Trevor, as I said, I'm looking for a general election. And really, I'm looking for some stability, some sort of order. I was asked today if I was pushed, would I have voted for Sunak or Mordaunt, and it's just because it favoured the markets. I think for people with mortgages and people who are worried, then this would completely calm the markets down. But to be quite honest with you, this chap was rejected by the party 6 or 7 weeks ago. So this is a plaster over a sore. It won't stop the internal bleeding in the Tory party.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you, Debonair. You know, there's support for your position here, but in reality, why would a general election actually solve the scale of the problem that Robert Jenrick's been talking about? Why now, given what's going on internationally? Surely a general election will lead to less stability rather than more stability.
Well, I think it's going to depend what Rishi Sunak comes up with. I think something's been very remarkable about this.
So you're willing to give him a chance?
Well, partly because we don't actually know what he's going to do. The man has been virtually silent over the last week or so, and we've not heard anything from him even during this official leadership contest. I don't think there's anything he's going to be able to offer that will bring stability to this country, because he's been part of propping up a government led by someone who was shown to have broken the law and is still under investigation for possibly misleading Parliament. He did that earlier on this year. He has failed to take responsibility when he was Chancellor for that emerging crisis partly caused by Ukraine, with people's energy bills. I mean, I think we have to look at his track record, but also look at the fact he's told us nothing about what his plan is.
But you haven't said why you think it'll make... You've told me why the Tories are bad, but you haven't told me why general election
because
will do
we
any
do
good.
have a plan. So what we've got at the moment from the next Prime Minister is a man who's had no plan, who doesn't show any understanding of what people are actually going through, and seems to have no way of dealing with what they're going through. Now, Keir Starmer, on the other hand, does.
All right. We have to go to break. This is the great debate. Up
Does
next,
he, though?
The United Kingdom has been ridiculed around the world over the past few weeks.
It does.
Can Rishi Sunak repair the damage done to Britain's standing on the global stage? With 3 prime ministers in just 50 days, the UK's reputation around the world for stability is taking a battering.
Right.
Rishi Sunak's experience in international finance may help him, but he'll need to work pretty hard to repair the damage of the past few weeks. He does start with some unique advantages, of course. His appointment has been immediately well received in India, and he's already secured his place in history by becoming the first non-white British Prime Minister, though he's also the youngest since 1812. Now, I want to talk to Colette. Colette Osborne in Nottingham. Good evening, Colette.
Good evening, Trevor.
What's your thoughts this evening?
Well, I represent the hair, barbering and beauty sector, many businesses across the UK with the hair barber plans that are not regulated. And along with the whole of the UK at the moment, we're all pulling our hair out. This chaos, political party politics, businesses can't afford the bills, jobs are and will be lost, and people's lives are being ruined. And frankly, I'm embarrassed to be British. I really am at the moment, with a laughing stock of the civilised world. I've met Rishi myself. As I said last week on this programme, if anybody can actually get the Conservatives out of the hole of the dog, it will be him. But what I want to know from the panel and from anybody, when will the government put the country first and their own personal gain second?
We've all put that question, Colette. Oh, you've had the good fortune that most people haven't had, which is to meet the next Prime Minister. Did he inspire you? I mean, you said you thought he could do the job, but did he inspire you with confidence? Or there's a terrible gag I'm about to make. Did he leave you tearing your hair out as a beautician?
Well, you know what? Well, as a hairdresser, look, we
pinched her gag.
The thing is, it did give me confidence. What he did do is something that I've not seen any politician do yet, which is engage with our sector and actually come in and listen to small business. And I actually had this conversation with him. Everybody says, he's a billionaire and he's rich and he doesn't need to do this job. But let's consider this. If he's doing this job, he's doing it because he cares. And that really came across to me. So actually, I have every confidence in him to actually get us out of the hole we're in. The markets rebound today as soon as it was announced. And if it doesn't work, but I think the only way Rishi will fail is if the Conservative Party do not stop their backbiting, and this means Labour as well. Okay. Can you all just stop and put the country first, please?
Okay, thank you, Colette. Robert Jenrick, stop the backbiting.
Absolutely. The Conservative Party needs to unite around Rishi now and give him its full support. I think what Colette said was interesting, that Rishi is somebody who I think you can have confidence in. I think he is a very honest and straightforward person. You saw in the summer, in the first...
Right, we talk about the same person who let 11 billion pounds worth of fraud just disappear into the ether.
Iteration of our leadership contest, Rishi didn't tell the Conservative Party membership exactly what it wanted to hear. He didn't say fairy tales about the state of the economy. Everything he said in the summer has been proven to be correct. I think that gives you a sense that he's willing to say the truth. He wants to be an honest, straightforward person. The other thing I'd say is that he is somebody who I think will represent us well on the international stage. As Chancellor, he was excellent at building links with the United States and others. He created, for example, the economic sanctions together with Janet Yellen, his opposite number in the US, which has put a lot of pressure on Russia. So he's well known on the international stage. I think we'll do that well.
I'm hearing about Rishi Sunak's virtues, but what Colette's question was really about is, will the Conservative Party stop, and this is not my language, but stop fighting like a bunch of weasels in a sack?
Well,
some of your colleagues keep saying we want unity, and the next thing they do is bung in a letter to get the leader to resign.
Exactly. Like, Look, I get that. I mean, look at Blair years, and Corbyn was consistently harping against him. But so yeah, there are always going to be people in the Tory party that are going to be rebels. But this is bigger than that.
But last week,
way bigger than that. Let me put it this way. Robert is saying that, you know, he's but the membership doesn't like Rishi Sunak, and there's going to be a lot of the membership that are going to fucking harp on and on and on to their MPs. I don't know. I think that this is not as safe as Robert Jenrick seems to think.
Week, I said that I thought this was an existential moment for the Conservative Party. Either we handled this well, chose the best person for the job in the national interest, not just who we would like or who is our friend, and then got behind them genuinely. We have to do that. If we don't do that, then we won't deserve to be elected at the next general election. Today I saw my Conservative colleagues applauding Rishi's appointment. I hope that that will be followed up in the days and weeks to come with genuine support so that we can get on with the job of governing the country and looking out for the interests of people like Colette and her business.
Now, there's quite a lot of applause from our viewers on that. But just very briefly, Ian Martin, you follow this a lot. Suddenly, is it going to suddenly change?
I'm not sure if it's going to change, but I think the Tories should really just forget about the next general election and start focusing on the country and start trying to repair the damage internationally. We now have a terrible image problem internationally. The markets need to be reassured. I do think it's relatively optimistic that you feel it's not going to be Boris Johnson. We lived through that 72-hour horror story of it possibly being the idea that this lunatic was going to try and be Prime Minister again after all the damage that he's done. And Sunak is...
Lunatic is quite strong language, but let's go with it.
Well, I'm just astonished that he even thought that he would try again. But you have someone in place who is relatively calm, technocratic. I do think he will have to have an election at some point. But you know that I think you can broadly trust him to do a competent job at a very, very difficult time internationally.
Jill, there's another part of this whole operation, which is governments are not just the MPs. There are, whatever it is, 400, nearly 500,000 civil servants and also public bodies. Do you think Whitehall is breathing a sigh of relief, or is it sitting there in trepidation thinking, what next?
Well, Whitehall likes stability in ministers. It finds it difficult to cope when you don't know from one week to the next who's going to be your minister. You like ministers who listen to advice. They don't have to take it, but you do like to think that they've given you a decent hearing for what you want to say. So that's one of the things that's really important. And I think actually Rishi Sunak did have a good reputation from the way he worked with his officials at the Treasury. So I think that's quite a positive. He's come in, I think, saying quite interesting things in his statement today about restoring integrity, accountability and professionalism. And I think people will be looking for that and would welcome some of that. But I think what you really want is a united cabinet that can give a clear direction to the civil service. Otherwise, it's an incredibly difficult, near impossible job to do.
Okay, back in Debonair.
Do you think the civil service gets overlooked so often? And I think that's partly to do with people like Boris Johnson, where you know you get these assholes come in and they're like, oh, what good is civil servants to just argue with the ministers, can't get the job done? No, it's the civil servants that get the job done, you fucking retard.
That's your worst nightmare, isn't it? That they might actually look competent. Surely what you like is prime ministers who are rocky, Conservative prime ministers, I should say, who are rocky, who are always in the newspapers, who people think are on their way out. Rishi Sunak doing what Jill and Robert Jenrick said would be the worst possible thing for you.
Absolutely not. We believe in country first and party second. Keir set that out. Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, at our conference in his keynote speech. Country first, party second is a very important principle to Keir and to us in the Labour Party. And we do that because we actually want the country to succeed. We want people like Colette, we want her business to succeed. We want it to do well. But I think the proof will be in the pudding. As I've said, we've not really heard from Rishi what he's going to do differently from what he set out in the summer. And it is unfortunately a very different country now. In order to establish our standing on, re-establish our standing on the world stage, there are various things that he could do. We've yet to hear if he's going to do them. I think he could do well to start by appointing an independent ethics advisor, which the previous two prime ministers seem to dismiss as completely irrelevant.
Okay,
and I think that's a really important way of re-establishing
I can answer
an
that
ethical
question.
heart of government.
Rishi has been very clear that he will appoint an independent advisor.
And about time too.
And so you'll see that very quickly.
But in amongst all this party politics, I think it needs to be understood how serious the situation is with the markets. Now, what the Trussites did was to make Britain an outlier, but there are all sorts of problems across the global markets, and that was just the first explosion. So the new government we all need it to be successful in terms of restoring some kind of economic order, reducing borrowing costs.
And you can have confidence in that. Because Rishi predicted that would happen. And you've already seen the market starting to
We spent an hour on that particular topic. I want to take us to another piece of a problem that the new Prime Minister has in his inbox, and talk to Stephen Fairley, who's an old friend of the programme, in Dumbarton. Stephen, I think you've got another problem for Mr Sunak.
Well, Trevor, I think as you probably know from my previous mentions on the programme, I mean, the Tories have no mandate in Scotland. I mean, it's the 10th Tory MP we've had, Tory Prime Minister we've had since 1955, and he has no mandate in Scotland. It's just more of the same for the people of Scotland. It's going to be austerity, arrogance, falsehoods, and contempt for the voters of Scotland.
So you've got a question for our panel?
I do. I mean, in the eyes of the world, is the UK looking more foolish, or do we already look foolish?
Ian Martin.
Well, I'm detecting a sort of pro-independence tone to that question.
Yeah, I didn't think you need to be Sherlock Holmes to get that.
Yeah, and as a unionist, I would say with respect, I hear that concern about mandate in Scotland, but I think the very last thing that makes sense at the moment is to do something which is 10 times, 100 times worse than Trussism, which is to attempt to leave the United Kingdom, set up a central bank, use the pound, create havoc on the markets and make Scotland much poorer. So I don't think independence is the answer. Actually, I think in terms of Scotland, what seems to be happening is the Labour Party is probably coming back. And I think an interesting thing in Scotland will be if voters start to get the idea you don't always have a Tory government inflicted, and the revival of the Labour Party in Scotland may actually spell disaster for the SNP long term. We'll see.
Okay. Boris Johnson made 4 visits to Kyiv when he was Prime Minister. He made firm commitments every time to help Ukraine in the fight against the Kremlin. A little earlier, I spoke to the former president, Petro Poroshenko, to find out how he's feeling about a Rishi Sunak premiership. He began by paying tribute to his friend, Boris Johnson.
First of all, Boris Johnson is a very great friend of mine and very great friend of Ukraine. And I want to use this opportunity, Boris, if you see me on the TV, I want to...
We'll make sure he's watching.
What the fuck is this?
I hope so. And I want to really grateful for your efforts since your ministerial position of the Foreign Secretary as a Prime Minister. And I want to use this opportunity to congratulate Mr. Rishi Sunak. And I absolutely appreciate that this is the position of the whole British people. The whole British people supporting Ukraine. The whole bipartisan support of the British Parliament, British government, and all British Prime Minister. Because this is war of Putin not against Ukraine. This is the war of Putin against whole free world, whole democracy, including the Britain. And during the last statement of Putin, he do not use anymore Ukraine. He said he is fighting with the Anglo-Saxon Anglo-Saxonian world. And I'm proud that we are part of.
What? The majority of Europe is not Anglo-Saxon. I'd love for someone to try and challenge me on that. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
The Anglo-Saxonian world to stopping the Russian aggressor, threw him away from here, and I'm.
In America, you've got Biden, who's from Irish stock. If I remember rightly, the Irish aren't of Anglo-Saxon stock.
A respect of the British democracy and choice of the British people, and for me it is not.
It's not. I don't want to be insulting to this guy, but it's not. The Rishi Sunak was not the choice of the British people.
No difference. It is Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister Truss, or anybody else. I am count on the British United Kingdom and the British people.
Well, you will have to deal with Mr. Sunak. If you were in conversation with him tonight, what would you be saying to him that the Ukrainian people need and want from Britain now?
First of all, I want to congratulate him. Second,
Okay,
I just want to remind that Rishi Sunak promised that in supply condition.
You're surprised that.
I didn't want to listen to it anymore. No, I'm sorry.
Briefly, what's your thought about where we've got to tonight? Okay.
And sorry about.
Briefly, what's your
of Ukraine in the European Union?
All right, that's the end of that.
Petro Poroshenko. Let's speak to Debbie. Debbie Lenton in Plymouth. Debbie. Briefly, what's your thought about where we've got to tonight?
I'm just surprised that who voted Liz in, firstly, was it the same ones who voted her out? That's a big shock for 6 weeks, to be quite honest.
You're surprised that. Could you say that again, please, Debbie? I didn't quite hear.
Who voted Liz Truss in? Was it the same people who voted her out?
Would you have preferred if the Conservative Party had stuck with Boris Johnson?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think he did an awful lot, to be honest. He got us out of Brexit, which he said he would do.
Oh,
okay.
Brexit's still happening
pretty quickly and efficiently, and he's helped with the Ukraine war. So he's had quite a lot to deal with, to be fair.
Okay, Debbie, that's evoked quite a lot of reaction from
a lot
panel.
of
so
a lot of
I am going to take a test of opinion now.
There are quite a lot of the viewers panel that are like, yay! But it seems like more of them are like, ugh. So yeah, I'm not sure people agree with you on that one. Like, that's not a good advocate for someone from the Southwest. Like, no, we do not need Boris Johnson back. We should getting rid of him was good. Pushing Liz Truss in was bad. But getting rid of Boris Johnson in the first place, that was a good thing.
Didn't expect this, but let's see if we can do this. I want to ask, who would have liked tonight to see Boris Johnson heading back to number 10? Let's not worry about the process, but if he had been able to win, who would want to see Boris Johnson back in number 10 Downing Street this week? Those hands up. Those who wanted Boris Johnson back. I think that actually, Debbie, you are in
the minority.
A small but courageous minority there.
Yeah.
Of
Most
about-
of the panel
about
are
10%.
thumbs down.
Robert Jenrick, was it so implausible? I mean,
yes,
prime ministers have come back.
Not, but...
they've come back into the cabinet. Alec Douglas Hume came back after having been prime minister to serve as foreign secretary.
I didn't think it was the right time for Boris Johnson to return. There might be an opportunity in the future, but I felt that it was wrong to do it now. There was a reason that Boris's government came to an end, and some of those issues are still unresolved, including an investigation by the Privileges Committee in Parliament. I thought it was better to look forward and have somebody new in the form of Rishi Sunak, albeit somebody with a lot of experience who the public are comfortable with. Just to answer the point that you heard from Petro Poroshenko, I do think that Rishi will take his responsibility to continue carrying the torch of freedom for Ukraine very seriously. He would like to visit Ukraine as quickly as possible, and he has been very involved in those efforts on the economic side. Now he'll work very closely with the Defence and Foreign Secretary on the international diplomatic angles as well.
May I just ask you a quick question, and you may only answer yes or no to this. Did you believe that Boris Johnson got over 100 votes?
I was sceptical.
Yes or no?
I have to say. But
I'll take that as a no.
Insight.
I'll take that as a no.
Exactly.
Let's go back to Jamie Martin. Jamie, you have a question for our panel in Beeston.
Yeah, I do.
Go.
To be honest, I'm sick of pie politics, and the country needs to be put first. So I do want to ask this question: will the Prime Minister put the country before the Conservative Party?
Thank you. This is a sort of obvious sitter for you, Tangham, but honestly, you know this person, just speaking not as an opponent, but as a fellow parliamentarian.
So what I heard this afternoon when Rishi made his first speech as the new leader of the Conservative Party is that throughout the speech he used a verbal device where he talked about the Conservative Party first and the country second. And he made his priority in that first opening speech, the Conservative Party. I don't think that's good enough, but I'm afraid to say it's not really about Rishi Sunak anymore. It's a revolving door of chaos, and that's not going to bring stability. I actually think that most politicians go to become MPs because they want to do the best for their country, but I'm not seeing that from Rishi Sunak, and neither did I from any of the previous Tory Prime Ministers.
Jill Rutter, non-partisan observer. What do you think?
I think that it ultimately what depends is the extent to which Rishi Sunak gets that actually he best serves his party interests in the long term by putting the country's interests first. I mean, he's inheriting, as Ian keeps saying, a really terrible economic situation. He's got to start sorting that out. It may be that he's sorting it out and ends up handing over a better economic legacy to the Labour Party, to Keir Starmer. I mean, that's after all, I was in number 10 when we had Black Wednesday. John Major then spent the next 5 years trying to sort of restore the public finances, taking some very difficult decisions, ended up handing over really quite a good legacy to Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. So I don't think that the two interests are as separate as this suggests now.
I don't think he's going to have any choice, because the stuff that he's going to have to do is going to be so unpopular. I mean, there are not going to be massive spending cuts. There are going to be very big tax rises. There's no other way to do it. That's what's coming, and he's going to have to level with people and tell people that, because borrowing isn't an option. Spending cuts won't be tolerated by the public in terms of public services, the NHS, welfare. There is only one place to go, and that is much higher taxes. Very difficult in a recession. It's going to be really tough, but he doesn't have an alternative.
But he's also,
okay, and I think there's a big elephant in the room that he's going to have to deal with, which I want to come to in a moment. But first, we'll go to break. This is the great debate. Some believe that the last few months have shown that Brexit was a mistake.
Fucking right. But just on that last point, I like. Yeah, Rishi. Yes, it's going to higher taxes. It's going to be the lesser. It's like the choice between Truss or Sunak to begin with in the summer, like choosing between the lesser of two evils: spending cuts or higher taxes. And higher taxes means higher revenue rather than cutting spending that's already been cut to the bone.
Does that need to be corrected if we are to see the economy prosper? Now, one thing that's been striking in this leadership race is how little the runners have told us about what they actually do in office. This morning, one of the Conservative Party's donors, the investor Guy Hand, said the economy was doomed unless the government renegotiates Brexit. So is it time to look again towards Europe? Let's talk to Neil Redlovich. And Neil, you have a question for our panel.
I find it interesting this question is being brought up this early. I didn't think that we'd go here, but apparently so. Fair enough.
Good evening, Trevor.
Good evening.
Brexit has been a disaster for the nation. The Northern Ireland.
You're asking a Scot. I'm not sure this is gonna be an unbiased answer.
Protocol, the side of the bus slogan.
Not to have a go at the Scots, but it'd be like asking a Remainer, like someone it's like asking, do you want a Tory government in Scotland? Of course you fucking don't.
Promises it will be seamless. The money saved for the NHS. A broken promise of voting no in the Scottish referendum will secure your EU future, all of which have failed to come to fruition. We have gone from a stable country to one on the brink of bankruptcy. So my question is, don't we need to change the Brexit deal that was negotiated by Boris Johnson in order to move on?
Thank you very much indeed, Neil. Neil's question there. Do we need to renegotiate the Brexit deal in order to move?
Didn't the EU say that fundamentally there is no renegotiation? I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what was said.
On Jill Rutter.
Not for me to say whether you need to renegotiate the Brexit deal, but if you want to help the economy grow, I think you want to avoid the threat of a trade war with the EU, which means I think you need to try and find a negotiated solution to the Northern Ireland Protocol. That's what Rishi Sunak, as with Liz Truss, said they want to do, but that will take some compromising and some political footwork to actually deliver that. But it also may mean facing down some of the hardline Brexiters in the Conservative Party. You could look again at elements of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement to see where you could ease things for doing business. And I think if you want to act immediately, tomorrow the Commons is having its second reading of a thing called the Retained EU Law Bill, which actually would make the Northern Ireland Protocol harder to operate rather than easier, and gives the government really quite sweeping powers to take a lot of EU laws off the statute book. There's undoubtedly areas where we can do regulation better than the EU did it, but that creates a lot of business uncertainty.
The government, of course, argues that that bill is a natural consequence of the decision to leave, and it's just essentially tidying up. But Tanya Debonair, let me ask you, where is Labour on this actually? I know the slogan is "Make Brexit Work," but
slogan.
Do you agree that there should be a renegotiation, for example, to get Britain back into what used to be the common market?
Well, the common market as a concept doesn't exist anymore, but we want to make our relationship with the European Union work. And that is how you make Brexit work. You do put in the hard graft that is necessary to sort out problems with the Northern Ireland
But what does it look like at the end? Well, do we bring down tariffs? Do we have freedom of movement?
There is no end to that relationship. And the way we want to end up is a relationship where we have a strong trading agreement with our nearest neighbours and partners, where we work with them on areas of mutual interest, such as scientific research, the climate crisis that we're in at the moment, shared tackling of crime such as terrorism and other threats there, where we've got mutual areas where we need to work together. Sorting out a way of doing all of those things is essential and would help improve our relationships with the European Union, which we are going to need to do if we want to make Brexit work, which we will have to do.
Ian Martin, is that possible?
It's possible, but I voted for Brexit, but I think it is a denial of reality. Those hardline Brexiteers who say that it's working and there's no problem is clearly a problem, is clearly a barrier to trade, and I think the story of the next 10 years or so is a story of moving back to a closer relationship with the European Union. I don't think I wouldn't want to rejoin the European Union. Imagine the renegotiation.
No.
Imagine the terms set. Imagine the referendum. We don't want to go through all that again. But I think it will fall, maybe it falls to the next Labour government, or maybe it falls to Rishi Sunak, who did vote for Brexit. There has to be an adult conversation about this and better trade and better ties with the EU.
Robert Jenrick, you can. I don't want to ask you whether you agree with that. I think you're probably sympathetic to that point of view. Question I want to ask you is this specifically: can you imagine members of your party who have stood out against virtually any kind of rapprochement with the EU, the so-called Spartans, the Suella Bravermans and so on, actually agreeing to the sort of thing that Ian Martin has just spoken of?
Well, I'd say it was firstly quite striking this weekend that Rishi Sunak received the support of Suella Braverman, Steve Baker, David Davis, Liam Fox, a number of the most prominent Brexiteers in the current Conservative Party. I think there is sign of hope that the relationship between the UK and Ireland, for example, has improved significantly.
If I may interrupt you, though, they will have come to that conclusion for a whole series of reasons. What I really want to ask you is the people who belong to the European Research Group who made Theresa May's life hell.
Most of the people I just
there's any possibility they will ever agree or countenance that sort of deal?
Well, most of the people I just mentioned are members of the European Research Group, and I think if you look at, say, Steve Baker, who is a Northern Ireland minister, he seems to be making considerable progress on building a more productive relationship.
Yeah, but I'm with Phil Morehouse on this one with a different bias. I'm very suspicious of his intentions going forward on that one.
With Ireland, that may help us to resolve some of the remaining tensions. I would like us to have a pragmatic approach. Of course, we want to defend the integrity of the United Kingdom, the ability of goods and services.
But that's not happened because the deal was shit because the people in charge were shit. I'm not sure how many times this can be repeated. It's like, what? Absolutely ridiculous.
Operate, freely through the common market of the United Kingdom. But I do think that can be done in a pragmatic way. And Rishi's election provides us with an opportunity to build those better relationships.
5 seconds.
A rare word of praise for Liz Truss. She joined something called the European Political Community, which is dedicated to security cooperation within Europe. So that's a start.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. That's all we have time for this evening. It just remains for me to say thank you to our panellists here in the studio. Pangham Debonair, Ian Martin, Jill Rutter, and Robert Jenrick. Of course, it's you at home who are always at the centre.
Yeah. So yeah, I like. I suspect running a government should go better with Rishi in charge. I wouldn't bet on it, but I suspect it will be. Party unity, maybe, maybe not. Like, he's right. The Ian, whatever his name was, he said what he said about higher taxes rather than cutting spending on public, cutting down on public spending more than it has been, which has already been cut to the bone, as I said. It's going to have to be that. We need a general election. I would suggest spring or summer next year, but I don't know. I wouldn't like to call it. I want to hear what Rishi's got to say for himself tomorrow. But yeah, I hope again that this won't be copyright bullshit. But I thought this one was one of the important ones. I tend to watch the great debates. They're not as in depth as I'd like, but they do go somewhere. Like Trevor going into Brexit the way he did, I was not expecting that. So I suspect we may see more of that in the future. Do let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, this has been Shally Wheaton, and this has been my reaction to the great debate. Are we ready for Rishi on Sky News? Blessed Thursday, everyone. I hope everyone has a good kväll.